Hello! Let's continue with our readings from the Corpus of Early Arabic Sources for West African History, edited by Lev Zion and Hopkins. Today's passage will be from Al-Bakri, an Andalusian Muslim geographer who wrote about West Africa despite never visiting the region. He relied on earlier accounts. And he also relied on reports from travelers and traders from the Maghreb and Andalusia who actually visited that part of West Africa, or perhaps crossed the Sahara, and knew something about it. Let's begin with our short passage, just a paragraph long. Between Tatamaka and the town of Kawkaw is a distance of 9 stages. The Arabs call the inhabitants of the latter the Bzrkanyyn. This town consists of 2 towns, one being the residence of the king, and the other inhabited by the Muslims. The king is called Kanda. The clothes of the people there are like those of the other Sudan, consisting of a robe and a garment of skins or some other material, according to each man's individual means. They worship idols, Dakakir, as do the other Sudan. When their king sits down to partake of a meal, a drum is beaten. The Sudanese women dance with their thick hair flowing, and nobody in the town goes about his business until he has finished his repast, the remnants of which are thrown into the Nile. At this the courtiers shout out boisterously so that the people know that the king has finished his meal. When a king ascends the throne, he is handed a signet ring, a sword, and a copy of the Quran which, as they assert, were sent to them by the commander of the faithful. Their king is a Muslim, for they entrust the kingship only to Muslims. They maintain that they are called Kawkaw because this word can be heard in the noise of their drums. In the same way the names of Azwar, Hir, and Zawila are heard in the drum beats of these peoples, saying, Zawala, Zawala. The people of the region of Kawkaw trade with salt, which serves as their currency. This salt is obtained from an underground mine at Tutak, in Berber country, and transported to Tadmaka, and thence to Kawkaw. Between Tadmeka and Tutak is a distance of 6 stages. So this very brief paragraph by Al-Bakri, although its brevity is a limiting factor, actually reveals quite a bit about the nature of Gao or Kawkaw by the time of the 11th century, when Al-Bakri was living. First of all, his etymology for the name of Kawkaw is erroneous. Most sources say that the name comes from the word in Songhay for acacia trees, and therefore it has nothing to do with the sound of the drum beats that are used in Gao. So this is another example of how you can't take literally everything the medieval external Arabic sources say, because sometimes they're erroneous, they rely on false assumptions or faulty information that's passing through different writers, travelers, and reporters who may or may not have actually understood the original intention or meaning of what they were describing or observing. However, Al-Bakri's account is also interesting in the sense that it calls into question whether or not, according to some authors, this actually was the same city of Gao or Kawkaw that was described by other Arab writers and other external Arabic sources. For instance, J. Spencer Trimmingham, in A History of Islam in West Africa, has actually suggested that Al-Bakri was actually describing a town further east of what is now Gao, or what historically is considered to be Kawkaw, on the Niger Bend. However, I find Trimmingham's reasoning to be less convincing, particularly since we know that Kawkaw or Gao did consist of 2 settlements on different banks of the river Niger, and that we know that one was associated with the king and was often perceived as not being particularly an Islamic center, whereas the other settlement was one that had a much larger foreign population of Muslims from the Mediterranean, North Africa, and beyond. However, Trimmingham's account, or summary of Al-Bakri's description, actually raises a number of interesting questions. For instance, the the title that Al-Bakri uses, um, which I basically just give you the letters instead of attempting to pronounce it, is given by Trimmingham as Al-Bazar Khaniyun, which appears to be a Persian word meaning merchant, which, if true, attests to the multicultural, multilingual nature of trading communities in this, engaged in trans-Saharan commerce to Gao or Kawkaw, particularly among the Ebadites and other sects in the 800s and 900s. And it's also interesting that the king is used, the title for the king, according to Al-Bakri, is Khanda, which, as Trimmingham points out, is almost certainly a title, and it's a similar one to that used by the ruler of Kebi in the 16th century, or Kanta. So this suggests that there may have been a connection between the Songhay peoples, or the Kawkaw peoples of the 11th century, and the peoples further to their east and south among what are now considered Hausa and Zerma people, although the Zerma are a branch of the Songhay, or at least speak a similar language. However, the title Kanta does sound very much like Kanda or Kenda, used by the ruler of Gao or Kawkaw as described by Al-Bakri. We also have an interesting description by Trimmingham of a similar dance that the women of Kawkaw had among the Teda, Kanembu, and Nilotic Nubians, who arranged their hair in rat tails and have a similar hair dance along the Nilotic Sudan, or what is now the Republic of Sudan, which, if true, would suggest that perhaps the people of Gao at this time were perhaps not so much Mande influenced, but were more similar to the Zaghawa, Teda, Hausa, and Zerma peoples further to the east. And if true, this actually would suggest that maybe Ibn Said's description from the 1200s of Gao or Kawkaw is not entirely off the mark. For even though Al-Bakri says that the kings of Kawkaw were always Muslim, but the people themselves were pagan or non-Muslim, Ibn Said actually says that Kawkaw is ruled outright by a pagan's or unheeded king, and that the people of Kawkaw are unheeded, and he compares them to the Baghama, so-called black Berbers, living to the east and the north. This is actually an interesting connection, because it would point out that perhaps one needs to look further to the east as well as to the south to understand the early origins of the Songhay, particularly their connections with regions in what is now Niger among the Zarma and the Hausa people, not to mention their connections with Berbers to the north, and then Mande cultures to the west. Anyway, this shall end our video for today on Al-Bakri and ancient Gao. We hope to tell more or read more excerpts from the corpus of early Arabic sources for West African history at a later date. Thank you very much for your time.